Hey guys, Chris Fix here. Today we're finishing up Project Nightlight with episode 3. And in this episode we're going to wire the light bar so we could finally see how this light looks at night on the trail. This is episode 3, so if you haven't watched episode 1 or 2, those episodes show how I built the rack that supports the light bar. I use pretty basic and affordable tools and build the light bar rack from a few pieces of steel. I'll leave the links to those episodes in the description. Now let's go get started and see what we need to wire the light bar. Although I'm wiring an LED light bar in this video, this applies to pretty much any wiring for any lights that you're going to put on your rig. It could be fog lights, it could be off-road lights, it could be LED, it could be halogen. So in front of you here is all the stuff you'll need. This kit comes with a nice wiring harness with the fuse already built in. It also comes with a nice switch. So if you really wanted to, you could wire this right to your battery. You can see they have everything set up for you. Wire it to the switch and wire it to the light. And then you're good to go. You don't really have to do much. You drill a hole for the switch, you run some wires, and you're done. But I like running relays for anything that draws a lot of power, so the electrical current isn't flowing through the wires that are in the cabin of the car. A relay is also a really good way to prevent voltage drop, so you get as much voltage as possible to the light. So I'll show you how to run a relay properly. As with all my wiring videos, I always make a diagram. You can see this is the front of the truck, this is the back, this is kind of like the bed. It's actually, we're facing like this. And it's a map view, so we're looking on top of the truck. The battery's in the front left corner. You can see I have a relay running there. I have the light bar right up here. So the relay is going to be the center of everything. We're going to have our switch, which triggers the relay. We have our power coming from the battery that goes through the relay. And then the relay feeds the power to the LED light bar. The relay is also grounded. I'm going to have a video on how a relay works and what's inside of the relay, but for now let me explain it real quick. So what this diagram represents is this relay. You can see with this relay there's 4 pins and they're all labeled 87, 85, 30, and 86. So I labeled it here the same thing. Now what a relay is, it's basically a switch. It's like an on-off switch. Instead of turning it on and off from here and like flipping a switch, you turn it on and off by running either a current through it or not running a current through it. So when there's electricity going through it, it's on. When you shut the electricity off, it's off. So to get that electricity, you don't need a lot. You just need milliamps of electricity, which is nothing. So we're going to tap into the fuse box, which is going to be connected to a switch, which is going to go to 86. So when you get this switch and you flick it to the on position, it's going to allow current to go into the relay. The relay is going to click on, and when the relay clicks on, it's going to allow power to go to the LED light bar. Now that power is coming straight into number 30 right here. It's going to be fused, and it's coming from the battery. Now the whole relay is grounded at 85, that's pretty simple, and then at 87, that's where you get your power to the light bar. And then the light bar has to be grounded itself. Pretty simple setup. And I always tell you guys, whenever you do wiring, just draw it out. It'll make it so much easier. You can label whatever you want, any parts that you might need, any lengths of wire that you might need, any of that. Now if you watch my Project Police Interceptor video, you'd be familiar with this wire gauge diagram. Over here it gives you the length of the wire, and up top here it gives you the amperage that the wire is going to handle. And this is how you correctly pick out what gauge wire you're going to use. I'll leave a link to this chart in the description, just in case you buy a light bar or something that doesn't come with the correct gauge wiring, you'll have something to reference. This is a 42-inch light bar. We're going to be drawing a maximum of 15 amps. So then we go to our chart. So we're going to be running about 15 feet of wire. We're running 15 amps maximum. So we go to 15 and 15 amps and we meet right in the middle. And that's where it says 10 gauge wiring. So we'll need to run 10 gauge wiring. Okay, just real quickly going through this nice and fast. Got our wiring switch, we got a fuse tap, different crimps and stuff to splice wire, heat gun. We have this plastic tubing to run wires into to protect it. We have our relay, a multimeter. We have some wire for the ground, wire for the switch, and then different like butt connectors and stuff. I don't know what we're gonna need, heat shrink, and that's it. We can get our light bar wired up. So let's begin. The first thing I wanna do is find the place for the relay. So we wanna find a nice place to put this. And you can see all my other wiring, my off-road lights, reverse lights, right over here. So I'm thinking that we put this something like that. Maybe we could turn it one way or another, but we could bolt it in right here. It keeps it nice and tidy, it keeps it in place. This is a very dry area. It's away from the heat of everything. So I think that's a good place for our relay. So anytime you're working on electronics, the first step is always disconnect the negative battery terminal. Next thing to do is lay the wiring harness out so you can see what you're working with. We're gonna run the wires from the light down under the truck along the frame to the battery. The wires are going to be run through flexible plastic tubing, and this will protect the wires and prevent them from chafing. let's go check out the wiring at the light bar. The wiring harness comes out of the light bar here, and I have a thick rubber tube to deter people from trying to cut the harness coming out of the light. It runs out to the connector right here, and this will end up connecting to the wiring harness we're installing. So here's our wiring harness, here's our connector. We're gonna go connect to the light bar. This is really simple. The wiring harness just plugs right into the light bar connector, just like that. Now for the exposed wires, we're gonna get our plastic tubing and push the wires into the tubing. The tube has a split in it, and you get the wires and push it into the split, just like that. Do this for the whole length of wire. Good. And it should look just like this. So we have the wires in the loom, and eventually it's going to get zip tied to the light bar right here. But before we zip tie anything, let's go run the wires between the cab and the bed. Down under the truck, along the frame, into the engine compartment. So I'm under the truck looking towards the rear, and you can see the wiring harness is right here. This is the frame of the truck, and we want to go to the other side of the frame rail. And you can see there's already wires running here. This is the harness I ran for my reverse lights, and this is the harness for the factory wiring. So we're going to run our light bar harness in the same place. Here's our wire coming down from the light bar, and we're going to run it along this frame rail. I'm pulling all of the wire down from the top. Alright, we have the harness pulled down, and we're going to run it along the frame, all the way down to the front of the car. Just follow the frame. Tuck this in behind here. And then on the other side, keep running it along the frame. You can see the other wiring harness I ran, which goes through the hole in the frame. And then it comes out of the hole and runs to the battery. After pulling it all the way through, we'll grab the wire and run it up here. Come up here. You can see it right down there. All right. So we have just enough wire, which is perfect. So if we look at our wiring diagram, the top post goes to the light bar, so we'll connect that now. Number 87 right here. Grab the red power wire for the light bar and plug it in. Just like that. So now the power to the light bar is done. The black wire coming from the light bar is a ground, and we'll ground that later. But the next step is to wire the switch to the relay. So we're gonna go from the fuse box through the switch to post 86 on the relay. So let's go do that now. Okay, now we're working in the interior of the car. Might be a good idea to wash your hands so you don't get your greasy hands all over the interior. We're gonna be using a fuse tap. And what this does is it fits right into the fuse slot, and we could actually get power from this. So we're gonna get power from this, run it to our on-off switch, which goes to the relay. Since the relay is grounded, we don't have to worry about a ground here. So let's go check out the fuse box. In my truck, the fuse box is located right here. And there's a bunch of open slots, as you can see. But out of all these open slots, which one has power and which one doesn't? Because not every fuse is powered when the car is off. And I want to be able to turn the light bar on when the truck's off. Now we have to put the negative terminal back on so we can get juice to the battery, so we can see which one of those fuses has power to it. Now we don't have anything hooked up, so it's okay to just put this back on. So now we'll get our multimeter. We have it set up to DC volts. It's on 20. And what you're going to do, you're going to go to an open fuse slot, and there are two contacts in there. So touch one lead to one side of the slot, and take the other lead and touch the other side. It doesn't matter the order of your leads. When both leads are in there, check the reading, and as you can see, we have no voltage. Try this one here. Nope, that doesn't give us power. Try down here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if we look here, number 17 is the fuse slot we want to tap. Now we're going to add our tap, and that simply slides in just like this. So I'm actually going to take this out for now so we could run the wires, and I should also explain where I'm going to put the switch. Now the fuse tap wire is going to run down here through the door harness here, and I want to mount the switch right on here. And the wire coming from the switch will go down here, through this, down to our relay in the engine compartment. So the door panel right here is where I want to mount the switch. Now to figure out where I want to put it, I'm going to have to take this off. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to put it like right about here. It's going to sit sideways, so when you're driving, you just flip it on or flip it off. We know the location where we're going to put our switch, so now we know how much wire we're going to need to run from our fuse box. So from our tap at the fuse box, we're going to have a wire which is going to run through the door panel to here. So that's our first length. That's the short length of wire. And then here's a long wire, which is going all the way to the engine compartment. Speaking of engine, let's remove the negative battery cable again so we don't forget. And now let's connect the wire to the fuse tap that'll go to the switch. So we're going to strip the wire. And get our crimpers. Just crimp that right in place. And to test it, just give it a tug, make sure it's not going anywhere, and that's solid. Good, now we have a good connection there. Let's go take off the door panel and run this wire. Now in order to run the wires through this, we need to take off this panel right here. Now this panel has one of these clips right here, so I'm going to just pop the clip using one of these special panel clip pliers so I don't break it. You can see it keeps it in good shape so I could reuse it. Good, now let's remove the door panel. So this is really easy to take off. 2 screws. It's 1, 2, pull from the bottom. So I thought we'd be able to get into here and kind of go through here. I peeled this back, but this actually goes behind this piece of metal right here. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to take this whole door panel off. Luckily for my Ford Ranger Mazda B3000, this thing is simple to get off. And the first thing to do is remove the screw right here. Good. Now let's get this off, and since I have crank windows, you have to pop this backwards just like that, and that gives you access to a Torx. This is a T20 Torx. Good. Now this should just pop right out. Might need a little wiggle. And there's one more screw right down here. Good. Now this simply lifts up and out. You might have to give it a little wiggle, but it lifts right out. Now right away I see these 2 holes right here where we could run the wires. So we could run the wires through the door up to the hole, across the door to the switch, which will be right here. Now this hole here is pretty sharp, so we're going to have to use a grommet to prevent the wires from getting frayed. It just presses right in, and you might need to use a screwdriver if it's tight. And that clicks right in just like that. So now I have a metal wire with a little loop at the end here, and what this is going to do is it's going to help me snake this into here so I could pull the wires through. So we're going to go in through here. Okay, look at that. So now we have the metal wire going in and coming out. Okay, now that the snake is through, I'm going to grab my 2 wires. I need to make sure that I have a wire going to the fuse tap and a wire that runs to the relay. So you have 2 wires going to the switch. Now the problem is we're going to be running the fuse tap, and since we're pulling it towards the fuse box, this would have to go in here, and well, that's not going to fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run another wire, and once I get this other wire through, I'm going to attach the end of my fuse wire and then pull the end of the fuse wire back through the opposite way. You'll see in a second. The other thing is I'm planning on running more switches for different things. I have bed lights, I have reverse lights. I'm hoping to get alley lights, which are sideways lights. That'll go onto the light bar. That's kind of why I designed this right here. I'm hoping I could get an alley light on this side and an alley light on the other side, facing outwards. So with those future plans in mind, I'm going to run 8 wires, which is enough wiring for 4 switches. So I'm going to open up my snake here so I can fit the wires in there. Just like so. Crimp down on that snake. Good. And then I'm just going to tape up the ends here so that they don't get caught on anything as I try to snake it through. Okay, we're ready to snake this through. Okay, we got it coming out the bottom. Now I'm going to run the snake in through here, which will go up here, and it'll come out here. So I could go run these wires up into the fuse box. So it's right there. Perfect. Now we can push this back into place. Good. Now we'll pull this through. Once it's all the way through, we could disconnect our snake here and remove the wires. Well, remember what I was saying before about running this through? We couldn't get it through. So we have that extra wire that we ran in here. So I'm going to grab the end of the fuse wire and tape it to this wire. Just like so. Now I'm going to grab this wire, which is connected to the fuse wire now. I'm going to pull it through. Ta-da! Nice and simple. So now we ran our fuse wire. Below the fuse box, there's a grommet in there, but I want to add some plastic tubing to protect the wires from any sharp metal edges. You just need a short length. Just like that. Okay, so it goes from spaghetti to a nice neat package. We don't want to have spaghetti, save that for dinner. And now I'm going to tuck this right in here until I wire up the other switches. Now let's get our fuse tap, and that has to be run up there to the fuse box. And remember, use your tools to make your life easier. Might as well just use that snake you've been using. Then we could attach our fuse and pull it up to the fuse box using the snake. And there we go. Now we could easily connect the fuse tap to number 17. Beautiful. Now we have to get the fused wire here and connect it to the switches, as well as connect the wire from the switch to the relay. But first, let's go install the switch in the door panel. So we're almost done with the hardest part. At least this is the hardest part in my opinion. Running the switch is kind of a pain. You have to drill into stuff. I hate drilling into stuff. It's such a permanent thing to do. You know, you could ruin your panel if you don't do it right. So I want the switch to be somewhere up here. I think it would look good anywhere right over here. And there's plenty of room in the back here because this kind of curls. So there'll be plenty of room to get the switch in there. So how this switch works, I'm going to peel this back. You can see there's a little lip at the end. You can see there's these plastic springs that push outwards. And below that is the base of the switch, which is skinnier than the springs. And it's about 18 millimeters. The lip at the end is about 22 millimeters. So we're going to have to drill a hole that's larger than 18 millimeters, but smaller than 22 millimeters. So I'm going to use this 19 millimeter, which is also 3/4 inches, hole saw bit. Before we use this big hole saw bit, I'm going to use a small bit to drill a pilot hole so the larger bit doesn't bounce around and it actually goes where we want it to go. Okay, so we said right here is a good spot. This looks good. Now I'm just going to use a Dremel to clean up the hole a little bit. Beautiful. Okay, the hole came out really nice. Let's go push the switch in. Make sure you orient it the way you want it to go. That looks good right there. And just push. There we go. And that's all it takes. I should also mention that you should run a ground wire. I should have ran it with these, but I forgot all about it. The ground wire is for your switches, so you could have your switches light up. So if you want your switches to light up, make sure you run a ground wire. We have our ground wire coming down, and you can see there's another ground wire here, so we're going to use that ground for our wire as well. And to do that, we're going to strip the end of the wire and use an eyelet. So just strip the wire, crimp the eyelet on, unscrew the ground, attach our ground, screw the ground back in, and there we go. We have our ground wire all set up now, and we have all our wires ready to go. So let's put the door panel back on. Now I'm going to just hang this back up without the piece in. These clips kind of slide in at the bottom. And then you press the panel down. Now we could quickly screw in the panel. Do the bottom one first. Screw in this middle screw here. Now we could put the window crank on. Just like that. And now the last thing to go on is our door handle, the black trim. And you can see it has our switch. And I also added switches here for other lights that I plan on using. One's going to be for reverse lights. One is hopefully going to be for alley lights in the future. And this one's for bed lights. And then this is for the light bar. So now before we put this on, let's wire them up. So I'm going to show you how to wire the switch that comes with the light. The same thing applies to all these switches too. On the back of the switch here, you can see there's one gold and then there's two silver prongs. The gold prong is the ground. That's how you get the light on the switch. So we're gonna ground that out. And for the other 2 silver prongs, all you need to do is attach a fuse tap wire and the wire going to the relay. Now the way I'm wiring this is I'm jumping the grounds. So for the ground on each switch, I'm jumping over and I'm gonna jump it over to the ground up here. And I'm gonna attach that ground right here to the ground that goes to the car. So this ground is getting jumped just like that. So we're gonna crimp these 2 together. So here's the wire from our door and here's the wire from our switches. Put them together. Crimp that. Okay, that looks great. I'm gonna slide the heat shrink right over this because we don't want the metal on this to be exposed. Okay, so that looks good. Now let's connect it to the ground post on the switch. Now we have our 2 red wires. The strip one is the one that's gonna go to our relay in the engine compartment, and the non-strip one is the one that comes from our power source, the fuse right over there. And to connect them to our switches, we're going to use these 2 connectors. They just crimp right on. Good. So since that's going to the relay, we're going to put that on the bottom one. Good. Strip this wire real quick. Get our other connector. Crimp that down. Good. And that's going to connect right into the middle because that's the one that's getting the power from the fuse. Just like that. So we got our ground for the light, we got our power in and power out. I'm gonna quickly wire these up for my other lights, but you guys don't need to see that. That's just gonna be using all this stuff. Alright, everything's all wired up. All my switches are good to go. Make sure the wiring harnesses are out of the way. After you ensure all your wires are not in the way, click it in. Okay, we'll get these final screws in, secure the door in place. And we're done with the switch. Okay, now let's add the fuse to the fuse tap. I'm going to use a 7.5 amp fuse because that's the smallest one I have right now, but when I get a chance I'll switch that to a 5 amp fuse. Now we could close this up. Good. Now let's route the wire from the switch to the relay. If we go under here, we're just looking for a grommet that passes through the firewall. And here's where I run wires from my other lights. So I'll use this spot to run my wire through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to route the wire up and away from the emergency brake pedal, and gas pedal. And then we need to get it through the grommet. So just push it through on this side. On the engine bay side, the grommet is located right down here. Grab the wire and pull it through. I want to route this wire where the rest of the wires go. Run it down here, through here, and it comes out right here. Now we're going to go crimp this on. Make sure you crimp it so it's tight and secure. So we're at the last steps here. So 87 goes to the light bar. We already have that done right here. So our fuse and switch go to 86. So 86 is right there, and here's our wire that goes to the switch. We'll connect that. Good. Now we have our positive fused wire, which goes to 30, and we have our ground, which goes to 85. So here's our positive fused wire, which goes to 30 right down here. And then here's our ground wire, which goes to the last remaining spot, 85, right there. So our relay is set. The light bar comes with a fuse already. This has a 20 amp fuse in it, since the light draws 15 amps. And the last thing we have is the ground here, which I was going to connect directly to the battery, but unfortunately this is the factory wiring harness and it just misses the post here. It's so close. So instead we're going to ground it to the chassis. The chassis ground is located right here. So let's ground the light bar right now. Put the ground wire on the bolt, screw it all the way in. Good. Okay, now let's mount the relay. We're going to put it right here so it's out of the way, and it'll also stay dry. Plus there's a stud, so we can use a nut to secure the relay. Okay. Now let's finish getting these last 2 wires in. Our relay ground wire is going to go to the battery post, so let me get that in the correct spot. Perfect. Our power wire is going to the positive battery post. Connect that onto there and tighten the nut down to secure it. Good. We have one last thing we need to do, and that's to connect the ground wire. So let's first connect the ground. Good. Now we're gonna get our ground, slide it on there like that. Add another nut to secure it, and tighten that up. Okay, now we're ready to try everything out. Now the moment of truth. Beautiful, it works perfect. And now that's what I call a job well done. I cannot wait to see this on the trail tonight. So just some finishing touches that I did. I pretty much zip tied the wiring harness all the way around. And you can see it keeps it nice and neat and out of sight. Same for underneath the truck. I just make sure that the zip ties hold the wiring harness in place. And then under here you can see got zip tied right here. Runs across, got zip tied there, and zip tied down there. It just keeps the wires nice and neat. Also so they don't get stuck on moving parts such as the brake pedal. Okay, and we are done. That's how you properly wire an LED light bar or any off-road lights. You could use the same process for wiring up these types of off-road lights, the halogen lights, the spotlights, pretty much any wiring job with a relay, but specifically in this case, lights. So let's go for a ride and see how bright this LED light bar is. Okay, so we're here on the trail. These are my low beams, high beams. And are you ready for the big unveiling of Project Nightlight? Boom! Let's go hit some trails. So this light is so bright, it's ridiculous. I could see the trails perfect, which is awesome. Without it on, you can't really see much what's going on. But once I turn it on, I can see all around me. I get a really good idea of what I'm coming up to. And it's not straining my eyes at all, which is great. You can see my hood has no reflection off of it. That's because my light bar is mounted back a little bit. The cutoff is, actually you can kind of see the cutoff. It's exactly at the hood. It's right there. And that's exactly where you want it. I couldn't ask for any better placement. Now you're not supposed to use these LED light bars on roads. It's for off-road use only. But on these back roads where there's nobody for miles and miles, it really makes that much of a difference. I mean, check that out. And you can see if there's any deer about to jump out in front of you. And the good thing about the placement where I have my switch, it's right next to the steering wheel. I want to shut it off, boom, it's off. I want to turn it on, boom, it's on. And I mean, here's high beams. Here's nightlight. So now you see where Project Nightlight got its name. As always, hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button for more project videos. So I'll see you guys in the next video. This concludes Project Nightlight. Now I'm off to go find the Jersey Devil.